Hey guys, Sean from Note Cycles. We're excited to introduce our newest Diamond Audio front fairing speaker and amplifier bundle for your 2014 to 2022 Harley-Davidson Street Glide or Road Glide. You'll receive the MST link, so that is your T-harness that will give you your RCAs and your audio output. You'll also receive the MSP WHR, so that's an 8-gauge power, ground, and remote kit. As far as the front fairing speakers, we're going to be doing the Diamond MP654 horn speakers, amp rack or amp holder. As far as the amplifiers, you'll have two to choose from in this new bundle. You'll have the Micro 4V2, which is 150 times 4 at 2 ohms, or 80 times 4 at 4 ohms. Or you can go ahead and choose the 2-channel version, which is the Micro 2V2, 250 watts times 2 at 2 ohms, or 150 watts times 2 at 4 ohms. Some of the advantages of adding the Diamond Audio horn speakers to your front fairings is you're going to get much more sound. Coupled with the amplifier, whether the 2-channel or the 4-channel, life-changing. You're able to hear it even cruising at 80 miles an hour on the highway. So now that we've gone over the product included into the package, we can go over some of the tools we'll need to install our MP654s and our 4-channel amplifier. We're going to go ahead and do the Micro 4V2 on our install today. So tools, we're going to need some type of screw or impact gun. We're going to need a panel popper. We're going to need a T25 and T27 Torx, a Phillips head screwdriver, 3/16 Allen, and then a 2mm Allen, that is to tighten up the power and ground connections on the amplifier. We're going to need a 7/16 socket, a T40, as well as a T20 Torx, and then some sort of socket or socket wrench. We're also going to need to have some towels or fender covers to protect the paint, as well as to protect the gas tank, because we'll be removing that to run the power wire. Now that we've gone over our bundle options as well as our tools, we can go ahead and get started on the bike. So let's begin with removing the front fairing. First thing you want to remember is always cover your front fender with some sort of blanket, towel, fender cover, just to protect the paint from anything falling on it, a tool, a nut, a screw, a bolt. So now that that's covered, we're going to go ahead and remove the first 3 bolts. They are a T27 from the top of the fairing to remove the windscreen. Now these 3 bolts, 2 of them are the same, 1 of them is different. The middle is a little bit longer, and I'll explain why it's a little longer. Now once that's loose, leave that in there to kind of hold the front fairing together after you remove the backside bolts, so it doesn't just fall off. So now that we've removed our T27 bolts from the front part of the fairing, leaving our middle bolt in, we're going to go ahead and go into the back side of the fairing and remove the 4 T27 bolts from there. And you're going to use your T27 to remove that completely. So now we got the right-hand side. We're going to go ahead and remove the same ones from the left-hand side. Now that we've removed all 4 T27 bolts from the rear part of the fairing, it's time to go ahead and remove the windscreen and remove our final holding bolt. So you're just going to slightly pull up. There are cutouts in your windscreen. Set that somewhere safe so it doesn't get scratched. And then holding on to the bottom of the fairing, go ahead and remove the final bolt. And then you'll be able to slide off the front of the fairing. And then there is 1 connector with the headlight. Pop that backwards and then remove and set in a safe space. Next step in disassembly is removing the 2 T27s from the vent. So now that your front fairing is off, we're going to begin with the unplugging of the factory Harley head unit, as well as some of the gauges to get that stuff out of the way to be able to get at all our bolts. So first we'll start with the factory head unit plug, push in the pin, push toward the back of the radio, release. Then we're going to have our factory USB connector. There's a small push pin, push it in, slide it out. Our factory antenna, same thing. These are all keyed to go in only one way. Slide that out of the way. And then our factory GPS antenna, same thing, one plug, slides right out. Now that will more than likely be attached to the top plate. You can just leave that there for now. We're going to go ahead and grab a small flathead screwdriver or a panel popper to remove the plugs from the gauges. So either end, the connectors on top, just lift up gently and remove the plug. And on the other side, the same thing, lift up gently and remove. Now the center one will have a lock on either side. So you just want to kind of gently pull one side off, pull the other side off, and that entire harness you can just move out of your way and put down. Once that's out of your way, you can get your antenna and just kind of get that out of the way like so. So now we have access to the bolts and screws that we need to get to remove the factory radio. Now we're going to go ahead and remove our 4 bolts that attach the top plate to the speaker pod with a 5/32 Allen wrench. Once those 4 are removed, T25 Torx to remove the top from the radio, as well as beneath the gauges. And don't forget about the one that holds the pocket where the USB cable goes. Four that hold the top plate to the radio, 3 in the gauges. And then 1 right here that holds the pocket into the USB. Now we'll gently wiggle this out, holding onto the gauges because they will fall out, and then gently wiggle and remove. Once that's all done, we can take our 3/16 Allen wrench and remove the 4 bolts holding the radio to the chassis of the motorcycle. Now that the last bolt is almost out, I'm going to put some pressure on the radio just to make sure it doesn't fall. And then you will just lift up and remove from the bike. Currently already installed on this bike is Diamond Audio's brand new MS HD 14. And if you would like to see the video on this radio, please check the link in the description. We're going to begin on this side with removing the power outlet plug. We'll go ahead and remove the Christmas tree clip from the speaker pod, unplugging the speaker. Just press in and release. Go ahead and grab your Phillips head screwdriver. There are 2 plastic Phillips heads holding in this bottom wiring harness. We're going to want to get that out of the way so we can get at the 3 7/16 bolts holding the side of the speaker pod in on either side. Now be careful when removing these. Just the screw will come out and the holder will come out after. And then there's one on the exact other side. And then pull out the little holder, as well as slowly slide out the rest. And now may be a good time to go ahead and release either your factory or aftermarket radio plug. And then you can let everything droop down, because we're going to be accessing, we need that to access a couple of 7/16 bolts, 3 to be exact, 1 lower, and then 2 upper. So we're going to be removing those 6 bolts on either side next. All right, so I have my 7/16 socket. I'm going to go ahead and remove the 3 bolts that hold the bottom of the speaker pod together. So once you break it loose, you can usually get it by hand. So there's 2. So continuing to move the last 7/16 bolt. Now this one is probably the hardest one to grab. All right, all 3 are out. Now we'll begin removing the 3 on this side. Same process, remove them. Bottom one's the easiest to get out. Number 2. Then the 3rd one. Now that we've got those 6 bolts out of the bottom of the speaker pod, we're going to grab our Allen wrench and our T25 Torx head to remove a couple more bolts. The 3/16 Allen will be used to remove the 3 bolts on either side of the speaker pod, and our T25 will be used to remove the bolts holding the radio top plate to the speaker pod. So we're going to go ahead and start by removing the bolts on the top plate first. Now that those are removed, we can go ahead and remove the 3 bolts holding the pod. You want to be careful once you get that last bolt out to have a firm grip on the speaker pod itself, because it will fall right out. So let's get those bolts out. I like to start from the bottom. So we'll start with that one. Then we'll go top towards the gauges. Pull that one out. Now I'll hold the pod while we're removing this last one. Once I remove that one out, I can just lift it up, pull it off. We'll repeat the process for the other side, starting at the bottom, going to the one towards the gauges, and then removing the 3rd one, making sure we're holding onto the speaker pod so it does not fall out. Once those are removed, we'll go over and jump in and get ready to install our brand new Diamond Audio 6.5-inch horn speakers. Now we have both our pods sitting on our table. We're going to go ahead and start removing our factory speakers. Again, you could have aftermarket speakers in there already, so your bolts and your screws may be a little different. In our case, we have the factory Harley-Davidson speakers in there, so we're going to remove the 4 T25 screws from each pod. So you can just start removing them. Once the final screw is out, you can go ahead and pull the speaker out. You'll notice that there's 2 plugs. Just gently wiggle back and forth until they pop off. And then you can set your old speaker aside. We'll go ahead and do the other side. Again, removing the 4 T25 screws. You can use a hand driver, you can use a screwdriver. You just want to be careful to not poke the speaker while you're removing or reinstalling. So now all 4 screws are out of this speaker. Same thing, go ahead, remove it. Gently wiggle side to side to remove both factory plugs from the factory speaker. Now your Diamond Audio front fairing speaker package will come ready to go. We will even include the extension harness that will come off of the speaker plug so you can just plug it straight in. Remember, it's a little bit different than if you've done other audio projects in your vehicles or your cars. The larger spade connector is actually the ground side of the speaker. Plugging in the Diamond Audio crossover, you will plug in the side with the terminals into the back of the speaker, and the side of the wires that are bare will go with our new extensions and plug into the push terminals of the speaker. We will also ship you 9 new screws to screw your new Diamond Audio speaker into. So instead of using your factory screws, you can go ahead and use the new ones. So let's go ahead and get this put in. So again, the bigger spade connector will plug directly into the larger one, the smaller spade connector into the smaller, and then we can drop the speaker in, making sure all the wires are in, and making sure the crossover is out of the way. Now you're going to want to make sure that you line up the holes for the speaker, because there's multi-holes in here. So it looks like we have them lined up. Go ahead and open up our screw bag and start these by hand. Again, if you choose to use a screw gun, just be extremely careful that you don't puncture the actual surround of the speaker. I'm going to go ahead and just do it by hand, and using my finger to protect, getting them most of the way down, and then I'll go back through once all of them are done and tighten them completely. Now I've got all 4 screws almost all the way tightened down. I'm going to go ahead and give them, just make sure they're tightened all the way. Looking at it, making sure that I don't see any holes or gaps. So that one is complete. Grab our other speaker. Again, big spade to the big plug, small spade to the smaller plug. Getting everything out of the way. And then adjusting our speaker to all the holes line up. There we go. And again, starting those screws by hand. And then screwing them all the way in. So now we'll go through and just make sure they're tightened all the way down. And take a look, just make sure that there are no gaps. Now our speakers are installed. We can go ahead, put the pods back in the motorcycle. Now one little tip, we're gonna get all the bolts back in, but we're gonna leave them loose until after the next step of the install. We're gonna start by placing the pod back into the bike, being very gentle that we don't hit the speaker against any of the inner fairing. Get your first bolt lined up and started by hand, just so it holds it there. Go ahead and grab your 3/16 Allen. Get the other two started. Okay, once those are started and they're stable, you can go ahead and grab your 3 bolts on the inner side. Again, you're just going to want to start those by hand, leave them loose. You may have to manipulate the pod a little bit to make sure that they go in correctly and you don't cross thread them. So 3 bolts in the bottom, 3 bolts in the top. Go ahead and put in our bolts for the top plate, and then we can move on to the other speaker. And everything's back in. It's secured. It's not 100% tight. We're actually going to wait till almost the very end to finish tightening all of the bolts for the speaker pod. So now, time to move over to the other side. Exact same thing. We're going to put the 3 on the outside of the fairing, 3 on the inside, and then onto the top plate. So let's do that now. So those 3 are in. We'll move to the bolts in the bottom. Now those 3 bolts are in but not tightened. Next step, we're going to go ahead and grab our amp mounting plate and get that mounted on top of the radio top plate. So we need to remove 4 T25 screws from the top plate that holds the head unit in. So we'll remove those. Once those are removed, we can grab our amp mounting plate. So this has some pretty cool features on it for being an amp mounting plate. You have some extra tabs to go ahead and mount some of those factory plugs back on, as well as pre-cut wire tie hold downs. So to mount the plate, you'll match the 4 holes with the 4 screws that you just pulled out. Again, make sure you start those by hand if at all possible. Gonna get our bolts in. And started, all 4 of those. Again, you may not have to manipulate the amp rack a little bit just to get it in there, but once you get them started, you can go ahead and tighten them all the way down. So now that that is in, we can go ahead and tighten the bolts holding the side to the speaker pods. Just get those snugged up and tight. because once we put the amp on the plate, we won't be able to get to them anymore. So now that's on there, nice and tight. Next step is we're gonna get our MST link plugged into our Diamond Audio radio and plugged into our factory harness. The MST link is Diamond Audio's solution for direct plug and play. You have harness into the radio, harness into the factory wiring. You have 4 channels of input to the amplifier, and then up to 4 channels out of the amplifier. Now, if you buy our 2-channel package, which would be the Micro 2V2, it'll come pre-ready to go, pre-soldered, pre-shrunken to plug and play directly in. If you buy the 4-channel version, exact same thing. It will come pre-terminated, pre-shrunken, everything to just plug right into the amplifier right away. So, plugging this into the head unit. Plug in till you hear the click, and then you will find the factory side of the harness. Plug that in till you hear it click. So now that is done. We'll get all this stuff out and ready to go. Now this will also come with a remote wire. We have also, if you have bought the Diamond Audio radio from us, we will have it pre-terminated with a female bullet connector on there. Now we're ready to install our Diamond Audio amplifier, or at least get it mounted. So we have a couple of options of how to mount it. Inside the amp rack, it will come with 2 large Velcro sheets that you can place on and then mount your amplifier to. It also will come with all your wire ties. You don't have to use those. We will also include 4 industrial Velcro squares, so you can mount it down that way. Or if you choose, you can screw directly into it. Just be very cautious of where you screw into the amp rack that you don't hit your radio. In this case, we're gonna go ahead and just use the industrial Velcro squares that we provide for you. If you do screw it in, you wanna make some notes and get your gains and your crossovers set. So on the side of the amplifier, we have our front and rear, our front input sensitivity or your gain control. You have your crossover settings, as well as your crossover frequency of where you will be setting that crossover point at. You also have a switch on the bottom for your remote DC. We leave it on remote because we're going to be using a remote line in. Right now we are only doing the front fairing speakers, so we're going to use the front end. I would recommend that you place it on high pass and cross it over at about 110, 120 hertz. That way everything 120 hertz and above will play to your new speakers in the front fairing. The Diamond Audio speakers will play from 110 hertz to 18 kilohertz. So you'll have that full spectrum of audio coming through. So let's go ahead, get the amplifier into position, get it mounted down, and we can start running our RCAs, we can start running our speaker wire in, and then we'll run our power and ground wire. So I've already placed the 4 industrial Velcro strips on here. Just want to be careful. There is a warranty void seal on the amplifier. Place it above that, and then you can go ahead and remove the adhesive coverings from the Velcro. So I think we're gonna place it about there. I'm not gonna press it down quite yet, because I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna love this spot. So you can always pop it up and remove it. If you wanna move it closer to the front, closer to the middle, but we're gonna just leave it there for now, because we're gonna have to plug in the RCA plugs, the speaker wire plugs, as well as power, ground, and remote. Let's go ahead and get that done now. Included in the box with your Diamond Audio amplifier will be your RCA connections. They will go on the same side as your crossover and your gain section. They are both exactly the same. Doesn't really matter which one you plug into which. It will, however, matter which RCA you plug into it to which. So you want to make sure you hear a click, give a little tug on there. So again, towards the back of the amplifier or more towards the gauges, that's going to be your front input. Towards the headlight is going to be your rear input. And go ahead and grab your MST link. They will be labeled what they are on each one. So I have my left front and my right front. So I'll go ahead and plug those in. Left into the whiter colored, green into the red. And even though we aren't using the rear section today, we may in the future. So we'll go ahead and plug the rear in as well. So we have our rear left, plug that into the whiter one, and then our rear right, the red one. So I would suggest putting some sort of tape over that so they don't rattle loose. It is a motorcycle. As far as our speaker connectors, we have our front and our rear. Again, we won't be using our rear currently, but we may in the very near future. So we'll go ahead and get these plugged in to the other side of the amp. That's where our power ground and remote also goes. So we have our front output of the amplifier and our rear output. White and gray is front. Make sure you hear that click. And green and purple are rear. Make sure you hear that click, get a little tug just to make sure they're in there. Now we have our speaker wires plugged in as well as our RCAs. So now we can take our provided remote wire with the male bullet on. Go ahead and plug that into the female bullet coming off the radio. There is also a remote wire, but that is more for your power antenna. So go ahead and run that up. Doesn't really matter how you run it, as long as it's nice. We're going to go ahead and plug that into the middle section of the amplifier. That is your remote line. And then you're going to grab your 2mm Allen wrench and go ahead and tighten that down, giving that a little tug, making sure that won't come loose. Now that all that's done, we can go ahead and remove our seats, remove our gas tank to get the power and ground wire run to the battery. So now it's time to run our power and ground wire to the battery. To do that, we have to remove our seat as well as our gas tank. Seats on Harleys, they're all different. Ours is a double seat, so I'll remove back seat, then the front seat, get them up out of the way. Let's do that now. Now that our seat's removed, we'll have to go ahead and remove these two T40 bolts holding the factory ECU down to get that up out of the way, as well as unplug two electrical connectors. One is for the gas tank, like that. Now that everything's unplugged, we can go ahead and remove and set to the side our ECU. If you have something to set down there, set something down there now so you don't scratch any of the paint on your bike. So now that our ECU is out of the way of our battery, we have 4 more bolts to remove. There are 2 T40s behind the gas tank and 2 on either side of the gas tank up towards the front of the frame, as well as we'll have to remove the petcock from the gas tank. You're going to remove the 2 covers from the 2 T40 bolts on either side of the gas tank. Right here. Go ahead and remove that. And you'll do the exact same thing on the other side. So now moving to the other side, we're going to remove the rubber cover as well as the T40 bolt. Get that out. So now let's remove the petcock from the bottom of the gas tank, the collar will slide up and you will pull down. I would suggest having a paper towel, dirty shop towel, something like that. So we're going to grab, lift it up and pull it straight down, and it will just come out. It may leak a little bit depending on how much pressure is in the gas tank, but it'll be minimal. So we have 2 more bolts that we have to remove. Also remember, we have some vents for the gas tank to remove. We'll just slide those out before we remove the bolts. And it's a T40. That one. Grab your bolts and then pick straight up on the gas tank. Make sure you already have somewhere safe to put it. Piece of cardboard, old towel, something like that. Now that the gas tank's removed, it'll show you our wire chase. We'll pop off the top of the wire chase and begin running the power and ground wire to our battery for our amplifier. Let's go ahead and remove the top of the wire chase so we can start running our power wire. Once we remove it, we saw all of our factory wires. We will actually run our power and ground wire along inside this wire chase. Put a couple wire ties in there to keep it nice and secure and doesn't flop around. So let's get ready to run our power and ground wire now. Included in the kit will come the MS-PWHR power kit. We will already have put on the wire ferrules for you, and it will come with a 60 amp fuse and the ground terminal already connected. First step though, take out that fuse, set it to the side. You don't want to accidentally touch anything. So to run this, it'll already come in the spider wrap. You're going to run it up the spline of the bike in the wire chase and then go on the clutch side of the bike. So we'll get it up here. I'll go around and pull it up through. Bring it up, run the power wire up. So the 12 volt in is on the front side of the amplifier or the headlight side, and the ground is on the back side of the bike. So we can go ahead and get our power in, grab our 2mm Allen wrench, or use the Allen wrench that comes inside the amplifier box. Get that tightened down. Give it a little tug, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And go ahead and put our ground wire in. Tighten that down with the 2mm Allen. Grab that, make sure that's tight. Now that that's good and tight, we can go back to the battery and hook up power and ground to the battery itself and put our fuse in. Power and ground wire are all hooked up at the amplifier. Now we're going to make sure we wire tie down the wire chase. So we're just going to make sure we give ourselves a little bit of slack up inside the fairing. Grab some of the wire ties that came with the amp rack and just go ahead and get that power wire tightened up along with some of those wires. 3-4 wire ties is more than enough just to kind of keep it there. Make sure it's snug down there. And we'll get one at the back end here. Get that tightened up and then go ahead and snip off any extra with your cutters, scissors, knife. So now we come to hooking up the battery. You will have some extra power wire and ground wire that we'll have to hide. So we'll go ahead and again confirm that we do not have the fuse in there. And we're going to grab a Phillips head screwdriver and remove our battery terminal. So start with that one. Start that back by hand. Go ahead and tighten that back down, making sure if you have a battery tender or anything like that, that everything is back to where it was. Now I can move over to the ground. Again, that's a Phillips head screw. Grab our ground wire. Put it on. Start that by hand. Go ahead and get that all the way screwed down. Now's the time. You're going to reinsert the fuse. You're going to get a little bit of a pop. Let you know that power was applied and it is live. And then you can hide the rest of the power wire down low, between the battery, beside the battery, wherever you can get it. Just be cautious of the little tab that holds the ECU back into place. And I'll show you that here in a second. Now that our power wire is all hooked up and secured, we can go ahead and replace the ECU back on top of the battery. Now you want to be cautious. There is a little notch here that they need to go into each other and link down. You also want to remember that you have two harnesses here that will need to be plugged back in. And then you can grab your 2 bolts that you removed from them and just get those in and started. And then you can go ahead and plug in your black plug and mount that down. You'll see there's a black and a gray hole. And then we will leave our gas tank one sitting next to it. So once that's all back in and started, we can go ahead and put our wire chase cover back on. That will just snap back into place. So when you go to put it back on, you're going to notice that there is a holder for the brake lines. Snap that back in, and then you can just push down. You should hear a bunch of clicking. And everything should automatically kind of go back into place, and now that's nice and secure. Now that that's done, we can go to the front, back to the front of the bike, do some wire management, some wire ties, cleaning it up, getting the whole front of the bike kind of back together as far as wiring wise, and then we can give it a test. Before we start cleaning up our wires and doing our wire management, let's go ahead, tighten up both speaker pods completely using our 7/16 wrench and our Allen. So I'm going to start at the bottom here, start getting these tight. Tight. There's 2. Let's get that one way in the back. Okay, all 3 of those are tight. Now we can grab our Allen and go ahead and get these all tight. And tight. Now we're 100% tight here. Move to the other side and go ahead and get those tightened up. I'm going to start with the lower bolts. And then the back bolt. There we go. Now the 3/16 Allen heads into the sides. Now they're both tightened up. We can start plugging in all of our factory harnesses, doing some wire management, making it nice and clean, and get ready for that first sound test. First thing we want to do is get this back in underneath the radio. So we're going to make sure nothing's in the way, kind of get it bent up. My antenna's in the way. There we go. We'll have to be careful of our power wire and our antenna. There we go, that's in. Now I'm not going to put the plastic retaining bolts in it just yet until I get everything else cleaned up. So now we'll just start going through and kind of getting anything that's not used or was not used out of the way. And we can go ahead and start plugging in all of our gauges, gas gauge, speaker wires, everything like that. So you're just gonna roll it up. Well, let me get my antenna out of the way. There we go. So we can start going up. Your first Christmas tree is gonna be right there. Get that plugged in. We can get our sound speaker pod plugged in. And then we can just start going around, plugging in each gauge. Getting that plugged in. Getting this plugged in here. That plugged in, and then down here plug in this speaker, and then go ahead and plug in our power outlet, and that Christmas tree and that one. All right, so now all of our gauges are plugged back in. This is formerly for our power antenna. So now we can start cleaning up all of the wiring that we did. Nice thing is the Saddle Tramp amp rack has lots of pre-done holes to do wire ties, put in factory Christmas trees, everything like that. So we're gonna go ahead and start getting the amp cleaned up, getting some wire ties on there. Nicely kind of run any of the wiring underneath. Get that in there, and then get it zip tied. Now you don't want to go too tight that you're going to end up pinching the wire against the metal. You just want to hold it there. Go ahead and do one on the end here. Just kind of get it tight, but it could still move, you know, but it won't fall out. Cut off your edges here. Now with the MST link, we're going to kind of get that up and out of the way, but first I want to put some tape over the RCA connections, kind of like I told you to do earlier in the video. So let me get that done, and then I'm going to get some of that put in between my radio and underneath my amplifier to save some space. You can use electrical tape, exterior tape, any kind of tape that's going to just kind of keep those together, make sure they don't fall off while you're riding. Nothing worse than losing a speaker while you're out on a cruise. All right, now we got all those wire tied up. We can kind of get this side in. go. Grab a wire tie and wire tie this all together so it stays neat. There we go. Wire tie. Snip that off. Go ahead and get some of these in there. One more wire tie here. Everything's wire tied. You can add a couple more of your choosing. Totally up to you. So the last thing we need to do, especially on our bike, is rerun our antenna. So we're just gonna, for now, kind of put it up here, keeping it out of the way. So it's out of the way for now. So now let's give it a quick test, make sure it plays, and we can go back, check any of our crossover settings and our gain controls, and then give it a real listen and see how it sounds. Now that definitely sounds way better than the factory speakers. Now that we've tested the audio in the bike, let's go up front, double check that amplifier, make sure all the settings are where we want them to be, and I'll go over that with you right now. Now again, we are only using the front channels of our amplifier, so we're only going to be checking the front channels. So here, the first dial is our gain. Right now that's a little under 12 o'clock. Next one is our filter switch. So right now we have it on high pass. And the next one over is the frequency setting. So again, we have it on high pass, and we have it at about 150 hertz or so. It's kind of hard to tell. It does go from 40 to 400 on high pass. And then the bottom switch there is your remote or your 12-volt DC offset. We have it on remote since we're running it off of our Diamond Audio head unit. So it looks like everything's good. Again, you may want a little more, a little less. You can always adjust that gain accordingly. And then inside the head unit, you can do some adjustments to crossovers and bass and treble controls as well. Now that we're done there, everything is secure, everything is back on, back together. We can go ahead and put on our fairings, put on our gas tank, put on our seat, and then you can go out for a ride. So now we're going to put the bolt back into the top side for the gas tank. Make sure it's tight, and then you're going to go ahead and put your cover back on. There we go, now it's on. So now we can get this bolt back in to hold the gas tank. Start it by hand. Then you're going to want to go ahead and put back on your rubber cover, making sure it pops over. Now it's on there. Then very important, make sure you plug in the gas tank and then hide the vent tubes. Make sure that's tight, we're good. Don't forget to go ahead and reattach the gas line. Making sure it's in by pushing up and then pushing it in. We just want to go over one last time, just make sure everything is in its place, everything's wire tied to your satisfaction, making sure that there's no loose wires, nothing's unplugged, checking all of our gauges, our speakers, everything like that. The only one that should be not plugged in is our headlight. So from there, we're going to go ahead and get our front vent put back on. And if you have a microphone for your aftermarket radio, go ahead and run that through however you have it run. Pop mine off and run it through the fresh air vent. And I'll finish mounting that later. Plug it in the front headlight first. Now I prefer to go ahead and get my fairing on and just put my middle bolt in loosely so it holds. Each side of the fairing, remember, you're gonna have a long bolt and a shorter bolt. Long bolt goes up top. Shorter bolt goes down low. That bolt started. Then you can go ahead and tighten all 7 bolts. If you have a microphone for your radio and you're using it, now's a good time to go ahead and just remount that. So that concludes our installation portion of this video for our brand new Diamond Audio front fairing, speaker, and amplifier bundle. If you have any questions or are looking to purchase this bundle, please visit us at notecycles.com, and please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, have a blast out there.